Hello everybody and welcome to session 3 or episode 3 of our Mind Body Connective. I'm Stefan Thank and this is Bridget Sunman. And we've already done 2, haven't we, Bridget? We've already recorded 2 video casts. So this is our 3rd video cast. And yeah, we're looking at the topic of the mind and body connection. And this time round, we're going to be looking at stress. And just talking a bit about stress, Bridget, is that all right?
Yeah, I think that's a really topical question, actually, for where we are at the moment. I mean, it isn't any time, isn't it? I think there's all sorts of things that can stress us.
Yeah, definitely. I think I was listening to a podcast just this morning that was talking about post-COVID burnout. And one of the things that they were talking about on there was the reality is that burnout is chronic stress. So, and I think sometimes the word chronic gets a bit confused. I don't know about you. Some people get a bit confused about that word chronic, but chronic just meaning that it's long term. It's something that is going on and on and on, right? And we're living with it over a long period of time. So chronic pain might be, I don't know, say a knee pain or a knee injury that you've just carried for years. Chronic stress is where stress affects us for long periods of time, right? Yeah, so yeah, I think it'd be quite good actually for us to talk about stress and in particular just looking at, you know, the topic of stress, what causes stress, and also just kind of maybe going a bit deeper into whether sometimes stress can be good for us or is it not good for us? Is there such a thing as good stress? What are your thoughts on that, Bridget? Do you think there's such a thing as good stress?
I do. Yeah, I do. I think we need a certain amount of something to get us up and get us going in the morning. And so I like to think of good stress as sort of like motivation, or it might be something like determination, or I know sometimes in the past, some of my previous bosses have called me quite tenacious. So I like to think of tenacity actually is, you know, I apply a good stress because I want to get on, I want to deliver, I want to do something. So I think there is, and I think, you know, if you sort of look at athletes and Olympians, they put themselves under stress, but to achieve something great. So I think as long as it's done with care, and we'll come on to talk about that, I think, you know, there is a certain amount of good stress we need.
Yeah, I agree, actually. I really do. I look at stress in a couple of different ways. I think that we've talked about this already in the past, and I know that we're going to talk about this a lot more, is that I think the key thing about stress is the awareness of it. So it's whether we're able to become really aware of where we are in that indication of how much stress we're allowing in our lives, how much stress we're able to take on at any one time. And when stress can become unhealthy is when we're not aware of it. And actually it just gets piled on and piled on and piled on and piled on. And before we know it, we end up in that place of what could be burnout, I suppose. And you know, burnout is essentially that feeling of being so overwhelmed that you just haven't got the motivation or the energy to do anything anymore, and that the way that you're thinking about things is in that kind of sense of it's just too much, I can't cope, I can't think about anything. And burnout in the body is that it would be the physical sense of that, so not being able to kind of be physically active in the way that we might normally be able to, but we'll talk about that another time, I'm sure. But yeah, so I think when I think about good stress and bad stress, I'm a bit similar to you, actually. I think there are absolutely there are certainly for me ways of being able to manage stress so that stress is used to our advantage, but also that there are the good stresses and the bad stress, the good stress and the bad stress in life. And I kind of look at that a little bit a bit like an old car. You don't get these as much now. You know, when you have an old car and you put your foot on the accelerator before you put it into first gear to drive away and release the foot off the clutch, and the rev counter used to do that, didn't it? So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
like that. And I always remember the old rev counters. As you put your foot down and the needle went up, the color would change on the dashboard. So it would go from, you know, maybe a black into, you know, something a bit lighter, and then before you know it, you're going into the pink, red, dark red, and then it's in this like real red zone.
Yeah.
So the car is telling us, you know, you're revving it too high, you're revving it too high. And I think that that rev counter analogy, that really sort of helps me to understand good stress and bad stress, because if a car's ticking over, the rev counter's kind of like that. But actually, sometimes we need to be, maybe mindful of the good stress, which means that it's not just ticking over. We're revving just a little bit and we're kind of here. And this is a really good place to be. And we operate, maybe at our best for some of us. We operate in that place where it's kind of ticking over here. But it's that awareness of when it gets right into the red, that rev counter, and it stays in the red. So the foot is on the accelerator for too long, and it stays in the red for too long. And therefore, what does that do to us physically, mentally, emotionally? What does that do to us? So I think the good stress and the bad stress, I think, for me, as I said, it really comes back to that awareness. Are we aware of how we're feeling? Are we aware of how much stress is in our lives? Are we aware of how much we can actually take on? Bridget, what about you? Do you feel that some days you can take on more, some days less? How does that feel to you?
Yeah, well, I think it differs per individual. I think one person's stress threshold will be really different to another, and that might be for a variety of factors. That might be because they've trained that muscle, if you like, for want of a better word. It might be because of their environment. My joyful stress area might be completely different to yours.
Totally.
What I like might actually make you stressful in terms of an environment, in terms of the food I eat, the way I exercise. So I do think it's different. I think that certainly in terms of a motivation force, it can be seen as a force for good. I think you're really, the analogy of the gas meter is brilliant, the petrol in the car meter. I think that's really good. And I think the awareness is that, it's not as clear as that when it comes to our minds and our bodies.
No.
And I think, we talked in some of the previous ones about autopilot. We've talked about overriding some of the things that tell us when we're maybe moving into not good stress. And I think like we can practice a muscle for it being good and a habit for it being good. If we practice that too often and we let it go into the red too often, but we're not seeing that red marker, that's when the real danger signs come. And if we ignore those as well, then that's when I think we get the burnout, we get the overwhelm, we get, exhausted. And we're in a time now where, what a year we've had. The lockdowns, the furloughing, the homeschooling. We've got a lot of very exhausted people who may not really realise that they're exhausted. And I think that's where the importance is of really being able to be aware, train that awareness, as you say. So what do you think the key things are for you in training awareness around this?
Yeah, so I think it is about, managing how much you think you can take on each day, each week, each month. So awareness for me is being able to, look quite deeply into, for me, my runway is always about a month in advance. So I'm forever reevaluating the workload that I've got. And I'm talking about stress from a workload perspective, and I'll move on to other things in a second. But work for a lot of people is life, and life is work, right? For a lot of people. And work is one of the biggest causes of stress. So we have to acknowledge that, right? So being a self-employed person and doing a lot of consulting work and doing a lot of partnership work, I'm really always kind of forward-looking, at least a month in advance, and kind of spending time on understanding the highs and the lows of my diary, for instance, and doing what I need to do with awareness to be able to pull back when I need to pull back. So if, for instance, I know that so here's the thing, April is going to be hugely busy for me, hugely. There's a number of things going on in April with various different companies, and it feels like March is the run up to that. So purposefully, I have decided that at the end of March, I'm taking 5 days out to just prepare myself for April, to look after myself. Now, I know that for some people that might be watching this, they might think, well, that's easy for you, Steph, you're self-employed, but it isn't. It really isn't. I'm taking this as holiday. So I'm going to take these 5 days as holiday, a Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and I'm going to take myself into a place where I can be peaceful, calm, quiet, do some self-nurturing, eat some good food, get some good walks in, and just take that space to be away from the screen, right? And be away from the laptop. So, but the awareness is in my ability to prepare for that time. I know that April's going to be hugely busy, so I need to be ready for that. And I'm forever forward thinking, trying to plan and try to really look after myself and create space and not feel guilty for creating that space. And I think that some of this is about our ability to give ourselves what we need in terms of self-care. And I know we talked about self-care a lot, and Bridget, you know how passionate I am about the word self-care being thrown all over the place, but not really, you know, having that deep understanding of what it really means. So an example for me might be, I was saying to a colleague of mine just 2 weeks ago, something's changed. It's really little. This is a really little change for me. Something's changed in my Tuesday diary that means on a Tuesday morning, I can have some time, which might
Nice.
sound odd, but it also means that I don't have to start work until 10 o'clock now. So as soon as that happened, the week that I noticed that change was taking place, I have changed how my Tuesdays work. And what I've decided to do is use Tuesday mornings to be a time where I go for a run and I come back and I take my time to get myself ready and prepared for the day. And this morning, it's Tuesday today. This morning I went for my run. I was out the door at 7:10. I had a beautiful run today. You know, the fog was lifting and it was just really nice to be out, very quiet on the roads. And when I came back from the run, which was about 55 minutes later or so, I came in and I really took my time to get ready. You know, I kind of did a bit of self-care, did a bit of, you know, I had a good breakfast, drank some water, listened to some music, got myself ready nice and slowly. And I came to my desk with a sense of calmness at 10 o'clock. So I had 3 hours to myself this morning. And my colleague said to me, I bet that won't last. And I said, I bet it will. And the reason I say that, and I'm not trying to be clever here, is that I was really aware of the fact that this time had become available. And do you know what I could have done with that, Bridget? What would have a lot of people done with that time as soon as it became available?
Probably done some more work.
Exactly. They would still
Another
started.
task to do, another to-do list to do.
Absolutely. I've got plenty of to-do lists sitting there.
Yeah.
But you're absolutely right. They would have just still stayed with their routine. Well, I'll still start work at 8:30, and maybe I'll use that extra hour and a half from 8:30 until 10 to just do some things that I keep meaning to do that's work related. But I just felt, you know, no, I'm not going to do that because the morning's getting brighter. It's going to be glorious for me to go out running every Tuesday, isn't it? So yeah, building that in. So this,
yeah, well, I think that's the key. That's the key, I think. And I think, you know, just hearing you talk through, you know, that as a really lovely example and really, you know, just thinking how good that sounds, that you, for me, the meter came up again, the speedo came up again, and it was almost like the planning and the organization that you're doing by looking ahead over that month and how you've then carved that time out on a Tuesday and something changing. You know, it's a combination of things, and it's almost looking, you were almost looking at for where your red marker was. That's what came over to me.
Sure.
And then coming back from that and then saying,
Absolutely.
well, where's the amber area? Well, that might be just into the beginning of April. What can I do to take me into the green at the end of March? I'll take some time out for me. And then, you know, you chose with your different habit today, Tuesday, you chose something different, you tested it, you experimented with it, you decided you really liked it, and now you've chosen that you're not going to actually let anything interfere with that, and you want that. And I think that's a really important process to capture, because it does take planning. This stuff doesn't just happen.
Absolutely, yeah.
Like the cumulative stress doesn't just happen. We just repeat something over and over again. So instead of repeating something that's not good for us, that's bad for us and making us in the red, let's repeat something that takes us back into the green. So, you know, it can be cumulative both ways. That's the really important thing. And I think, you know, that awareness, that choice, that planning has to come together, almost like a strategy.
But you're absolutely right. It does again come back to awareness and choice, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So I didn't make the choice of just thinking, well, I'll just do some more work on a Tuesday. This was 3 weeks ago. I mean, I've been running through COVID. It's been a thing that I've been building up. But the self-care, and this is the important part, I think, Bridget, the self-care is not about the running. It's not about the running. The self-care is about the choice of what you're going to do with that time. So somebody's run might be somebody else's gardening.
It'd be my yoga. I mean, I choose not to go for a run, and I choose to do maybe some yoga, or maybe go in the garden. But this is where I say, I think, you know, it's got to be individual, and one person's stress could actually be another person's joy. If you think of, you know, bungee jumping and parachuting and whitewater rafting, and somebody just sitting in a tranquil garden, just really enjoying that. Who's to say any of those are not right? If they're right for the individual, that's the key thing. But it is back to awareness and and starting to know and trust that for ourselves.
Yeah, totally. Back to awareness and back to, so this window's been created for me. Isn't that a great opportunity? What do I want to do with it? Because I'm not going to work. So you're absolutely right. I'm so passionate about that. And you're absolutely right. One person's running is another person's yoga, is another person's baking a loaf of bread or being in the garden or going for a walk with the dog. So it's about the use of that time. And that's where the self-care really comes in.
It's about yeah, sorry.
Yeah, go on, carry on. No,
I was
carry
going to say
on.
it's about finding what's right for you. I mean, I think the clue's in the name, isn't it? The clue's in the name, and I think you're absolutely right to say that almost a bit of lip service is paid to self-care. But you know, the clue's in the name: self-care.
Yeah.
My care, self-care, not
What do I want?
Not Steph's care,
Yeah.
not my boss's care, not my partner's care. My care, what's right for me?
Yeah, what do I want? What do I need? Absolutely. Yeah. When we were talking earlier about good stress and bad stress and this analogy of this rev counter, right?
Yeah.
I just want to come back to that. So the kind of the thing for me as well about the good stress and the bad stress, is there such a thing as good stress? And you kind of nailed it, to be honest. There absolutely is. And the way that you described it, you know, spot on. The thing for me around the good stress and the bad stress is, if you take that analogy of that rev counter, bad stress is when you're just in that red far too often for far too long a period without really knowing that it's happening. And that's when that being in that top end of that rev counter where that engine's really revving, that ongoing relentless bad stress, that's what causes us to move into that place of chronic stress, which then turns into maybe breakdown or burnout. And then good stress is how we manage to get the rev counter off of the lazy bit at the bottom that makes us procrastinate, right? Because I really see that as well. That's bad stress. Procrastination is a whole nother topic of conversation, isn't it? But good stress is when I always think about this as an L shape, right? So I've got this kind of L shape like this, and the needle starts here. That's the maximum, that's the minimum. The good stress is how you can get it to hover about there. So how can you get it to hover about there? And it's not to say that has to happen all the time, but good stress, I think, to your point earlier, good stress is when, you just know you're on your game, right? You know that the pressure or the stress that you're putting yourself under is really making you perform in a way that brings you that sense of fulfillment. And that could be performing at work, that could be performing at home, in your relationships, in your conversations, in the tasks, in your run, in your yoga, in your gardening, whatever it is. But that good stress is just the thing that really makes us feel quite human.
Yeah, I think it does put us in touch with our humanity. I think I'd probably challenge on where that level is. I think it differs for the individual.
Yeah.
And I think it differs if you have been chronically stressed.
Totally.
I think there's not necessarily this gradual back to a particular place. You might have to stay almost feeling lazy for quite a period of time, and then suddenly you might jump to a place on that dial. But I think the individuality is important, because I think so much, we're all supposed to be this one particular, do this, do that, got to be at this particular level of performance. And I think it varies. And I think particularly if you have been in a chronic situation, I think the meters really, dials really important to show where you can be, but I think we're all in a different place. That's just what I wanted to add to that, particularly around chronic. I think it's really important around chronic conditions.
Yeah, and I really acknowledge that, actually, and I'm glad that you've mentioned that. I think that what you're talking about is something that I would see as like a boom or bust cycle. So, for people that have suffered from chronic stress, long-term chronic stress, to that point of burnout or breakdown, that they've been in that place for so long, they're in that bust cycle. So they just fall over and it's just bust. They're done, fatigued, low motivation, no energy to do very much at all. And then for some people that maybe, I guess some people that hover from one to the other, as you just said, that's the boom and the bust, right? So for instance, somebody that might have stress from chronic pain, so you've got chronic pain, and I talk a lot about, with people that have say chronic pain in the back, right? It's very common, chronic back pain. And if I'm teaching stress reduction around the physical aspects of stress, Sometimes I might encourage the student or the group of students to rate that stress. So what is it today? What does the pain feel like today? It's a 7 out of 10, 10 being bad. What did it feel like the day before? It was a 4 out of 10. What did it feel like the day before that? It was a 1 out of 10. It was one of my best days. So that kind of impermanence of pain, stress-related pain in the body. But what comes with that is that when somebody's suffering with, I think this really plays into what you've just said, but when somebody's suffering from chronic pain as an example, if, for instance, they have a day where their pain is only a 1 out of 10, what do? They go for it. They go for their life with great guns, right? With gusto. They get up in the morning and they think, oh, I haven't got any pain today. That's brilliant. You know, so today I'm going to achieve everything that I couldn't achieve in the last month, right? And they really go for it. And then what happens? By the end of that day, they are in agony.
Yeah.
So
I think they're absolutely bust, aren't they? And they've boomed and they've
boom
bust.
and bust.
So for me, that's around pacing. That's what something that I work with clients,
definitely.
is around how they can pace themselves. So I think, you know, the analogy of rating the day, actually really important. I work with people around sort of diaries that sort of, you know, look at things over 3 or 4 weeks or 6 weeks or 8 weeks, a little bit like food diaries, but, you know, where were those pinch points in the day and how many of them did they have? And back to your looking ahead, looking at what's coming down the line, 8 and 10 weeks away. How does that cumulatively have an effect?
Yeah.
You know, you can really start to track that then for yourself. And I think this, you know, this whole business of pacing, watching, we'll come on eventually, I know, to talk about rest and relaxation in some of these sessions. And again, there's a cumulative nature to that. And I think it's just being aware, spotting the cycles, and then taking some action through some choice.
Completely. Oh, it's fantastic. Oh, Bridget, it's been a brilliant conversation today. I've really enjoyed it. And I'm glad that we've got onto this topic of stress. And I know that this is going to be a continued conversation for us. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. One of the things that I'd really love to talk about with you next time is anxiety. And just getting onto that topic of anxiety.
Good topic, yeah.
And just really bringing to life that I think anxiety and stress gets separated quite a lot in society.
Yeah.
But they're one of the same thing, and I think that it'd be really good to bring that to life with you a little bit
and
more.
Then there's pain as well, so you know, maybe anxiety links with pain and how we feel about pain, either, you know, in the body or in the mind. There's lots we can talk about.
Lots to talk about. Well, thanks for your time again today, Bridget. I've really enjoyed our conversation.
You're welcome.
Thanks for everybody for tuning in and listening to Bridget and I's discussion around the Mind Body Connective. Look out for the next episode 4, and we'll see you all soon. Don't forget to follow the blogs as they come up. So if you're watching this on LinkedIn, or if you're looking at them through YouTube, you know, don't forget to subscribe to YouTube and like the LinkedIn page. Take care.